Hey everybody, Syntax77 here, just out and about, testing out some gear and waiting for spring to finally kick in, hopefully, one of these days. It's a little overcast right now and in the 40s here on the East Coast in mid-April. But what I'm here to test out, besides this backpack, which I have it in, this is my new GoRuck GR1 backpack, but that is for another day, another video. What I'm testing out today is a water purification device called the Steripen, or more specifically, because Steripen's been around for a while now, this is the new Steripen UltraLight model with the American Red Cross branding. Now, if you're finding this video because you're just starting out backpacking, you might be looking into your options for water purification. Or perhaps you've already been backpacking or camping, etc., and you are like me. You've been using a water filter for years. You've perhaps heard of Steripen, which I'm going to get into the details of how it works in a minute, but you might be a little skeptical, and that's understandable. This is a water purification system that does not use any filtration at all, which is pretty much par for the course, standard kind of stuff for making, well, outdoor water safe to drink. This does not do that. It works by using UV light from a light bulb in here. And don't worry, we're going to get a closer look at this in a minute once I come over here and start testing it. But basically, just know we're going to use UV rays to kill the bad guys in our water and make it safe to drink. There's also another important distinction that I should bring up here, and that's the fact that most water filters, at least the portable ones that we'd be concerned with for backpacking, they do not have filters with pore sizes small enough to capture viruses. They pretty much just do bacteria, protozoa, cysts, things like that. Viruses are much, much smaller, 10 to 100 times smaller than bacteria. It's just not small enough to catch them. With a UV system, it's going to kill everything. Doesn't matter how big it is. So it's pretty much going to cover all the bases except for heavy metals and chemicals, which is another subject. And to be fair, viruses generally are not an item of concern out in the wild in North America. But it is worth noting, and it is undeniably an advantage. Just something to think about. Now, like I mentioned, I may be like some of you out there. I've been backpacking for many years now and have not tried a system like this yet. I've tried many different water filters, but not one of these. And as I go through this video, I'm going to try to basically view it from a skeptic's standpoint. I'm going to try to personally look at the things that may have held me back over the years from taking a look at one of these systems more seriously and see if I can answer those questions. Now, I just got this. This is really just a kind of first impressions video. I'm going to show the system, and me and you are going to learn about it together. I'm going to look at some of the features and then maybe even go a little bit deeper to show you what some of the lights and stuff mean on this thing, which is important. I should also mention via micro USB on the back here, you can flip that open, charge it off of a wall socket, charge it in your car charger that you already use for your cell phone, or a USB battery pack, which you may already carry to keep your cell phone alive, etc. In my case, I keep my camera gear alive with that, so I'll be able to keep this thing charged indefinitely. You might be asking, how long does it last on a charge? Let's just get into that now. On a single charge, it is said to be able to do 20 liters of water, which is a pretty decent amount. Let's say you're on a 3-day trip by yourself and you even do 3 liters of water a day for both drinking and cooking. Well, that would give you, simple math, right? Like 6.5 days, something like that you could go with this. If you're out with a friend, well, cut that number in half, so you could probably do a long weekend 3-day trip on a single charge. And like I said, there are various USB chargers out there. So instead of with the other systems bringing out a handful of AA's, well, you could just bring out a charger that works for you. Whether it's maybe just a little lipstick style USB charger that gives you one more charge, all the way up to a giant power bank that you can keep this thing alive for months off of. Also, keep in mind, you could use a solar powered USB battery pack as well, and then you're really self-sufficient. But that's a whole nother thing to think about, right? All right, so let's talk about operation. The way you use this is to simply dip it in the water and stir it. After 90 seconds, a light will go off to let you know it's been long enough and all the bad guys in the water are killed. I know what some of you who are skeptical out there are thinking, which is what we're going to do in this video, is kind of answer some of those questions. I typically carry, because I like ultralight backpacking as well as cheap backpacking, I carry a disposable water bottle, a narrow mouth guy like this. You might see the problem right now. A lot of people say that the weight savings on one of these guys, which in the case of the ultralight version here is only 2.6 ounces, all right, so around 2.5 ounces, not bad at all for a purification system, but people will say it gets negated, that weight savings, by the fact that, well, it's not going to work with this narrow mouth. I can't get it in there deep enough to get it in and swirl it around, which means that typically what people traditionally use this system with is this right here, a wide mouth Nalgene. And compared to this bottle, which is probably an ounce at the most, I'd say, most disposable 1 liters are 1 ounce. This is 6.5 ounces or so. I know I personally weighed this with that little bit of duct tape on there and it was 6.5 ounces. That's a huge difference in weight, but it does work perfectly with the Steripen system. You can get it right in there and swirl it around. So people will say, I'm not going to bother with that because the convenience and weight savings is completely thrown out the window because I have to carry this big old Nalgene around. And even if you have another backpacker ultralight cheap favorite, the Gatorade bottle doesn't quite make it in there as well, just barely. At least with this ultralight version, it's just a little too wide to get in there. Now, I have seen people do really cool modifications, as I drop it, with their caps, where they'll take a cap and they'll kind of cut a hole in it and put some sort of foam sealant on it, and they'll devise a system where they can actually turn this thing upside down and swirl it around, and that's kind of mounted in there. That would work, but that's a subject for another day. Although, feel free in the comments section if you yourself have some sort of cool solution like that. I'd be more than happy to hear it, but we're not going to get into that today. So the Gatorade bottle is out. Another option that is lighter than the Nalgene and more resilient in cold temperatures, which is another story as well, is this 40 below bottle, and it is 4.5 ounces, but that's still 4 ounces versus 1 ounce. So that's not quite cutting it either. So what do? Do we just take the hit? Do we not go with the Steripen system? Well, not necessarily. I have a pretty simple solution. All I did was get a 1.5 liter water bottle right here, cut the top off of it, marked it at the 1 liter mark right there, so I know, because I should also point out, we're just kind of bringing things up as we go here, the max amount of water you want to sterilize or purify with the Steripen is 1 liter. That is their suggestion. So I just put that line there so I know to only fill it up to there at the max. Now I can simply, right, after I fill this up, stir that around, purify it, only costs me a half ounce, and then I can pour it into any water vessel of my choice. Another advantage of this is another thing that people who are skeptical of the system bring up, and that's the fact that typically you would take your Nalgene or whatever, and you'll dip it into your water source like I have here back behind me. We're going to consider this contaminated, right? That's our problem. So we dip it in and then we sterilize it. But people will say, wait a minute, hold up. You dipped into the water, so you still have contaminated water all over the threads and the edge and your drinking area, as well as the body of the bottle. Well, that's true. Now, I have looked into that, and from what I've read, the amount of harmful microorganisms that would be on that small of a surface area is actually supposedly not enough to worry about. But I know, I'm with you on this one. I want to play it safe. So what do? Well, if I'm doing the dip method, it's pretty simple. You just dry it off. Once it's dried off, there's no more water there. There's no more bacteria that may be harbored or other little nasty microorganisms that you need to worry about. But, however, if you're ultra paranoid, that's fine. Play it safe. For a half ounce, you can do this water scoop method. This will always be kind of your dirty water vessel. And when you pour it in here, your bottle is clean. It never touches the dirty water. So that's my solution. And pairing these two up here, 1.5 ounces for both the scoop and the bottle. Right now, if I can find it in my pack here, we're going to go ahead and get into using. First things first, as aforementioned, just going to dip said vessel, collection vessel if you will, into the water and pick up some water. And that's a little less than a liter, but that's okay. That'll get the job done, right? Anything up to a liter is fine. That is the max for the system. Now we just take our Steripen right there, And it has on it, let's move that back a little bit. It has on it the protective cover, just a plastic cover to protect it. And we'll pull that off, and now you'll see the actual bulb there, right? A thing that people are sometimes skeptical about is the durability of this. As far as you've got this glass bulb there, right? And that could break. Well, it should be pointed out. See this on the outside? It looks like it is glass. I looked into it. It's actually a quartz outer liner that protects the bulb, so it's much harder and more resilient than glass. On top of that, there is apparently some dampening materials at the base that you can kind of see if you look down in there, almost like a shock absorber to help this thing kind of survive being dropped, etc., if you will. And that should hopefully allow this to take some tumbles without breaking. Probably noticed from my other shots, it's a little muddy, but we didn't end up with mud in the actual water. There is some slight discoloration from whatever might be growing in here, algae, etc. And that is something to keep in mind. Although even with the filtration systems, you're not necessarily going to turn water like this into crystal clear water. But the point of the matter is, this is going to be safe to drink afterwards, and that is the most important factor. So there's no power button on here to hit or anything like that. You can see up close there, the only thing I have really on here is the USB charging port that would flip back. That does make this resistant to water getting in there, and you can see the standard USB port right in there. That is your weakest point, of course, but it is splash resistant, heavily splash resistant because of this rubber plug. Other than that, the entire unit is sealed up and waterproof. As long as you don't completely submerge it past that point, you should be just fine. I'm going to go ahead and dip it in, and you'll notice there, I might have to give us a top view, it starts blinking green. It's just blinking on and off, and that is telling you, yes, it is working, it's doing its job, and I can actually from the side see a faint blue glow of the UV light through here. Now, of course, it's bright out, so at night or something, it'll probably be even more visible. But my main indication, all I have to worry about is that green light is blinking. After 90 seconds, the light will change to solid green, and it will let me know that it's done. So I don't have to worry about counting to 90 or anything like that. A couple things to point out while we're waiting for it to finish. One thing is, let's say you're in an area where there is more like sediment and stuff like that in your water. Well, all you got to do, really, it's simple. You can just take a cloth, like a handkerchief, bandana, maybe a spare t-shirt, just put it over top of this and pour water through it. And that will get your main kind of gunk out of the water. Pine needles, any type of debris, stuff like that. That's stuff that, well, even if you're using a filter system, that's probably a good practice because all that's going to do is clog up and gunk up your filter system. So not really anything different there. That's all you would have to do. This water is pretty nice, so I didn't have to do that. No big deal. But that is an option. Another thing to point out, some of the myths about this system that I have read, one of which is it doesn't work at high elevations. And from what I read on Steripen's website, that's not true. Elevation doesn't affect this unit at all. And if you think about it, why would it? So where does that myth come from? Well, let's think about this for a minute. If you're up at high elevation, there's a good chance you're where? Probably in an alpine zone or alpine-like conditions, meaning that you are using snow melt. That's the most common thing that you're going to use for water in those types of trips. Here's the thing with snow, and this is actually one of the things about this system that I found interesting because I go on winter trips myself. Melting snow is very time consuming. It takes long enough just to get the snow melted. Getting the snow to the point where it's at an actual boil, which is when it's killing the microorganisms that you don't want, getting it up to that point is a whole nother level and a whole nother amount of time consumption. So in the winter, this system could have some good advantages as well, at least I thought, because I could melt that snow, just get it liquefied basically, and then use the Steripen to kind of go the next level and really kill all the bad guys in there, because if you're just bringing it up to a melting point, you're not necessarily doing that. Unfortunately, what used to happen on some of the older models in particular, here's how it works. On here, you'll notice there's two metal kind of probes, right? That is how it senses that it's in the water, so that it can start blinking or telling you that it's working, etc., right? The way it senses that it's submerged in that water is not actually the water itself, but the minerals in the water. It's what I guess creates that connection between the two probes there. Snow, unlike the stuff coming out of this stream here, is really about as close to pure water as you can get. I mean, it fell out of the sky, it landed on the ground, you picked it up and you melted it. There's very little mineral content in snow. So on those older units in particular, when you dip the Steripen into that liquefied or melted snow, it wouldn't sense any minerals and it wouldn't turn itself on, because it only turns on when it's fully submerged, which is a safety issue. So that's, well, working properly. You wouldn't want to be stirring this with just like the tip in there or anything. So what they did, I think it was back as far as like 2009 or something, they increased the sensitivity of these mineral sensors. And now apparently even with like distilled water, which if you buy that at the store, it has like no minerals in it, even that will still be sensed by this and go off. However, in a pinch, keep this in mind. If you're paranoid and you're going on a snow melting trip like I just mentioned, you want to save fuel by not having to bring your stuff all the way to a boil, all you got to do is just bring a little bit of salt. If you add just a pinch, the tiniest little amount of salt, not even enough that you can really discern it taste-wise, that will allow the mineral sensor to, well, realize that it's in water. But from what I've read, that's not an issue. I'll find out. It's going to be another season before we get to winter, so I won't know for a little while, but I'll keep that in mind for future trips and videos. So putting that topic aside, let's get to the water. It's done. All I got to do now is pour it out of here into my vessel. Or if you're using a Nalgene or another wide mouth vessel like that, you would have already been in here, right? You just wipe off the top and you're good to drink it. But in my case, I'm doing my ultralight kind of setup here. Ultra cheap too. Nalgene's like 10 bucks. A water bottle is, well, hopefully you might already have one laying around. So it's either $1 or free. But that's it. That's really it, folks. I pour that into my bottle and then I drink it and don't get sick. That is some cold, tasty water, which actually, as I speak about it, brings up another subject. And it kind of goes back to snow, but bear with me. Remember I said I was excited about the fact that this might be able to help me on those snow melt trips. Well, even if you don't go on deep winter trips like that, you might be going out where the temp goes below freezing. And when I looked at the stats on this, at the spec sheet, it said the temperature range on this was, well, let me say, 0 to 40 degrees Celsius, otherwise known as, in Fahrenheit, 32 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So basically they're saying don't use it below freezing. So I was like, man, that's a shame. Kind of bummed me out. But then I looked into it further on Steripen's website, and the reason they say that basically is because of battery life. So batteries in general do worse at lower temperatures. So what they're saying is below freezing, you're going to have a much reduced or decreased battery runtime, and you're not going to get the same results. Like you might not necessarily get the full 20 liters of treatment out of a single battery charge on this guy that you would normally. However, it will still work, just not as, well, efficiently in terms of battery usage and runtime. That's okay. I would say on a winter trip, what I'm going to do is just, this is what I do all the time for all my electronics, particularly camera gear. I know to just bring about 3 times at least the battery power on a trip that I would. So I'll just bring a USB rechargeable battery pack and I'll be good to go. I can use this thing in the winter. It's not a problem below freezing. It's just going to require more charges. Now, of course, having to worry about recharging your water purification system is a little bit of an extra chore, if you will, compared to a water filter. But if we're going to talk pros and cons, you should also take into account the fact that there's no filter with this system, so therefore there's nothing to get clogged, and there's no need for the typical maintenance that you would do on a filtration system. Back flushing, scrubbing, cleaning, and whatnot to keep that filter running. So just another little pro and con there. Which also, I should point out, this thing could save you money compared to the older versions because, well, A, when I looked into it, apparently in the past they said to only use lithium-ion batteries, AA's, I believe. And I know from personal experience, because that's what I use in my GPS unit, compared to normal alkaline batteries, those lithium AA's are expensive. I hate having to buy them, but they do work really well, particularly in cold conditions and for a lot longer. So on the old units, way back, apparently they just didn't trust that an alkaline battery would work that well. On the newer units, apparently it does work, but they still don't suggest it because the runtime just isn't great. This system here, you don't have to worry about it. It's already got a battery baked into it, most likely some sort of lithium battery right inside. Anyway, you don't have to worry about that because you won't have to spend any more money on batteries. You're just going to keep recharging this guy with a USB charger, whether that be a battery pack that you charge off of the wall or, like I said, a solar charger. All right, so that pretty much covers the operation of it. But like I said earlier, I want to go over what some of the indicator lights mean on here. I already mentioned the first one. If it is blinking green steadily, that's good. It means that it's in the water and it's working. You just keep holding it until, after 90 seconds, it goes to a steady, solid green light. That means that the water has been treated. If it goes to a solid red, you want to back up and stop, or most likely push it down further, because what the solid red light means is that it is not fully submerged in the water, so therefore it's not working. Now, if the battery is low, it's going to alternate a green, red, to let you know, hey, battery level is low, just letting you know you should charge it soon. If it switches to just a constant red blinking light, just a steady red blinking light, that means you are even lower. You're super low. It's time, like right now, to charge that battery back up. If it does single green, then two red, single green, two red, on and on like that, that means the lamp life is getting low, and it says here, less than 100 uses. And then, if it does one green, three reds, one green, three reds repeating, that means lamp life is ended. Lamp is damaged or expired. It's no longer working. Which brings up another subject. The life of the lamp is rated, according to this, for 8,000. I'm sorry about the geese. It's rated for 8,000 uses. That's a lot. After that, you would have to get a new filter. So some of you might be bummed out about that. I don't blame you, even though that would be 8,000 liters. Well, check this out. It says right here, you actually, for details, can go to, I think it's on the box here, you can go to steripen.com/pledge and learn how Steripen will replace your pen after 8,000 uses. So apparently, even if it dies, if you hold on to it that long, which I'll probably lose mine before the 8,000 uses occurs, they'll replace it. Details are on the website. Pretty simple, not bad, right? So I think at this point that pretty much covers everything about this new Steripen UltraLight water purification device. I think it's pretty cool. Like I said, this is a first kind of look at it. I will be taking it on several trips in the future. I've already got 2 planned that I'll be taking it on. So stay tuned for this to show up in those future videos. We'll give it some real life use, and then I can tell you a little bit more about how my experiences are going using this thing in the wild. But there you go, the Steripen UltraLight water purification device. Till next time, I'm Syntax77, and you have fun out there.